October 23, 2019, 11:07 p.m. A desperate 911 call reported shots fired at a Phoenix gas station. By sunrise, 2 bodies were found, brutalized beyond recognition. The perpetrator, a phantom in a ski mask, vanished into the night, leaving investigators with no leads and a chilling question. Who would commit such a horrific act of violence? This is the story of Sarah Hayes, a bright nursing student, and the night her life was stolen. Born May 12, 1997, in Phoenix, Arizona, Sarah was just beginning her journey. This is what really happened. The harsh fluorescent lights of the Desert Oasis gas station convenience store hummed, casting a sterile, unforgiving glare on rows of dusty snacks and faded lottery tickets. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, the kind of hour where silence felt thick, broken only by the occasional rattle of a passing car on the desolate stretch of highway outside Phoenix. Sarah Hayes, 22, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, was restocking the impulse candy display near the front. Her warm hazel eyes scanned the shelves with practiced efficiency, a gentle smile playing on her lips as she hummed a quiet tune. She was tired, the end of a long shift and the looming pressure of her nursing exams weighing on her, but there was an inherent vibrancy to Sarah, a brightness that even the dim glow of the convenience store couldn't extinguish. She dreamed of making a difference, of bringing comfort to the sick, and this part-time job was just a stepping stone. Suddenly, the bell above the door chimed, a jarring sound in the quiet. Silas Jones, late 30s, entered. His gaunt face, perpetually unshaven, was shadowed by hollowed eyes that darted around nervously, his wiry frame swallowed by faded, nondescript clothing. He pulled a worn baseball cap lower, his dark, unkempt hair barely visible. He moved with a coiled tension, his desperation palpable, a man on the brink, driven by crippling debt and a burning sense of injustice. He needed money, fast, and this place, this late hour, felt like an opportunity. The air in the store shifted, the quiet no longer peaceful but fraught with an unseen threat. Sarah, momentarily distracted, looked up, her smile faltering slightly as she registered the man's unsettling demeanor. He moved towards the back, his eyes never still, scanning for cameras, for escape routes, for the easiest way to claim his prize and vanish into the night.
Detective Kofi Adebayo, late 40s, stood at the yellow tape, the crisp desert air doing little to cool the heavy atmosphere. The Desert Oasis was no longer just a gas station, it was a crime scene. The events of that Tuesday morning had shattered the quiet routine of this stretch of highway. 2:17 a.m. The time was seared into the minds of the responding officers, a marker of unimaginable violence. Adebayo, a man whose 6'1" authoritative build was often softened by the perceptive, intelligent dark eyes that had seen too much over 2 decades on the force, surveyed the scene with a grim familiarity. His close-cropped salt and pepper hair was damp, not from sweat, but from the sheer weight of the tragedy unfolding before him. He'd been called in shortly after the first patrol car arrived, alerted by the chilling report, a robbery gone wrong, a young woman dead. Sarah Hayes. The name echoed in the sterile silence, her bright star extinguished in a moment of senseless brutality. Adebayo's focus was absolute, identifying the perpetrator, reconstructing the night, ensuring that this act of violence would not go unanswered. He spoke quietly with a uniformed officer, his gaze sweeping over the convenience store's interior. Every detail mattered. The scattered candy bars, the faint scuff marks near the register, the chilling emptiness where Sarah had stood just hours before. He could already picture Anya Petrova, Sarah's mother, the devastating phone calls she would receive, the deep, unending sorrow that would now define her life. His job was not just about finding a killer, it was about delivering a modicum of peace to those left behind. He felt the familiar ache of responsibility, the unwavering resolve to bring justice to this bright young woman whose life was so tragically cut short. The small apartment in Phoenix felt suffocating, the air thick with unspoken grief. Anya Petrova, early 50s, her gentle face now a roadmap of sorrow, sat by the window, her gaze fixed on nothing. Her kind, deep-set blue eyes, once full of warmth, were now clouded with pain, her pale skin almost translucent under the soft lamplight. Graying blonde hair, usually meticulously pulled back in a bun, had come partially loose, wisps framing her face like shadows. Her slender frame seemed to shrink into the modest, practical clothing she wore, her hands, resting on her lap, trembling uncontrollably. The phone call had come hours ago, a brutal interruption to the quiet evening Anya and Sarah usually shared. Sarah, her vibrant, energetic Sarah, gone. Her world, her only child, her reason for emigrating from Ukraine had been extinguished in a violent act she couldn't comprehend. The dream of a secure future, meticulously built over years of hard work as a librarian, had crumbled into dust. Anya clutched a framed photograph of Sarah, her 22-year-old daughter beaming, a lock of auburn hair tucked into the corner of the frame. The why of it all was an unbearable weight, a question that gnawed at her soul. She wasn't just a grieving mother, she was now the sole advocate for her daughter's memory, the reluctant face of a tragedy that had stolen her future. The quiet sobs that racked her body were a testament to a pain so profound, so absolute, it threatened to consume her entirely. Justice felt like a distant, unattainable shore, but she knew, with a force born of absolute devastation, that she had to find it, for Sarah, and for whatever fractured piece remained for herself.
The sterile white of the interrogation room seemed to amplify the silence. Detective Lena Kovich, her gray eyes, sharp and unwavering, stared at the faded photograph. It was Sarah Hayes, not the victim discovered in the sterile convenience store, but the young woman alive, her auburn hair framing a face alight with the promise of a future abruptly extinguished. The date stamped on the corner, barely 3 weeks before that fateful night, felt like a cruel taunt. Kovich traced the outline of Sarah's hopeful smile with a fingertip, the weight of the unanswered questions pressing down. Who was Sarah Hayes, truly, beyond the newspaper headlines and the grim statistics? The preliminary reports painted a picture of a bright, ambitious nursing student at Arizona State University, devoted to her family and passionate about her calling. Her parents, interviewed briefly, spoke of her kindness, her unwavering dedication to her studies, her plans to make a difference. They recalled her excitement about an upcoming clinical rotation, her anticipation of graduation, her simple joy in shared family dinners. Yet, beneath this idyllic surface, Kovich sensed a hidden current, a vulnerability that had perhaps drawn the predatory gaze of the killer. The missing 911 call, a single desperate plea cut short, haunted Kovich's thoughts. It was the ghost in the machine, the spectral echo of Sarah's final moments, a soundbite that promised answers but delivered only frustration. Kovich leaned back, the worn leather of her chair creaking. The scar above her left eyebrow, a subtle reminder of past battles, throbbed faintly. She had seen this pattern before, a life brimming with potential, cruelly snuffed out by a predator who moved in the shadows, a predator who saw vibrant life as something to be extinguished. The Quickmart murders, a seemingly random act of violence, were beginning to reveal a chilling, calculated design, and Sarah Hayes was at its heart. The initial forensics report lay open on the table, a dry recitation of facts, time of death, cause, evidence collected. But it was the human story behind those sterile numbers that Kovich was piecing together, one agonizing fragment at a time. The story of a young woman whose life was a tapestry of dreams, now reduced to a crime scene tableau. The air in the room felt heavy, thick with unspoken narratives, the quiet hum of the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Kovich's mind. Every detail, no matter how small, was a potential thread, a clue to unraveling the darkness that had engulfed Sarah's life.
The glow of the monitor cast an eerie blue light on Roman Volkov's gaunt face. He sat hunched in his chair, surrounded by the organized chaos of his digital world. Empty energy drink cans and discarded takeout containers formed a grim still life on his desk. His thinning, mousy brown hair was unkempt. His piercing blue eyes, usually unsettlingly intense, were narrowed in concentration as he navigated the labyrinthian pathways of the internet. The persona of Bibliophile 88 was his sanctuary, a meticulously crafted digital identity that allowed him to shed the mundane shell of his offline existence and embrace his true, darker nature. He reveled in the anonymity, the detached power it afforded him, the ability to observe, to infiltrate, to manipulate. Sarah Hayes had been a particularly vibrant thread in the digital tapestry he was weaving, her innocence and optimism a beacon that drew his predatory instincts. He'd watched her online for months, meticulously gathering information, creating a profile of her desires, her fears, her aspirations. Her posts about her nursing studies, her family's modest home in Phoenix, her dreams of travel, each detail was a piece of ammunition, a tool to erode her perceived defenses. He saw himself not as a monster, but as an architect of fate, a judge of perceived moral failings, particularly among those he deemed naive and overly trusting. The thrill wasn't just in the acquisition of information, but in the psychological grooming, the subtle nudges that would lead his chosen prey closer to the precipice. He would craft messages, seemingly innocent at first, gradually introducing darker themes, testing the boundaries of her comfort, gauging her reactions. He craved the feeling of control, the absolute power of dictating another person's reality, and ultimately, their demise. The Quick Mart was merely the stage, the predetermined endpoint of a narrative he had painstakingly scripted. The murder itself was less about the act of violence than the culmination of a prolonged campaign of psychological warfare, a testament to his perceived intellectual superiority over both his victims and the law enforcement agencies he believed he could outwit. He closed a file labeled Hayes Final, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. The digital veil had served him well, cloaking his true intentions, allowing him to move through the world unseen, a phantom predator in the machine, always seeking the next vibrant life to extinguish.
Detective Kovich stared at the whiteboard, a chaotic constellation of photographs, timelines, and cryptic notes. The case of Sarah Hayes and Ahmed Hassan was a tangled web, each thread leading to another dead end, another unanswered question. The media was circling, demanding progress, and the pressure was mounting. But Kovich was relentless. She'd spent countless hours poring over Sarah's digital footprint, sifting through social media posts, emails, and online chat logs, searching for any anomaly, any digital breadcrumb that might lead her to the killer. It was in a deleted message thread recovered by the forensic team that she found it, a series of increasingly unsettling exchanges between Sarah and a user named Bibliophile 88. The messages, initially friendly, quickly devolved into something more sinister. Bibliophile 88 displayed an unnerving knowledge of Sarah's daily routine, her personal fears, and her deepest aspirations. He would insinuate himself into her conversations, offering cryptic advice that seemed designed to isolate her, to sow seeds of doubt about her friends and family. Kovich felt a chill creep up her spine. This wasn't random. It was calculated, predatory. The user's digital footprint was intentionally obscured, routed through multiple proxy servers, a ghost in the machine. But Kovich was a ghost hunter. She began to cross-reference the recovered IP addresses with known data breaches, dark web forums, and past cybercrime investigations. The scar above her eyebrow seemed to pulse with renewed energy as the pieces began to align. She remembered a similar pattern from a cold case she'd worked years ago, a pattern of digital stalking that preceded a series of unsolved disappearances.
There were whispers of a former IT technician, a man with a history of erratic behavior, a man who had vanished from professional circles years ago. His name was Roman Volkov. The name clicked. Volkov, with his unnerving detachment and a mind that thrived in the shadows of the digital realm, fit the profile like a glove. Kovich instructed her team to pull every piece of information on Volkov, no matter how seemingly insignificant. This was it. She felt it in her gut. The digital veil was beginning to fray, and Roman Volkov, the phantom predator, was about to be exposed. A faint glimmer of hope ignited in the oppressive darkness of the investigation. The missing 911 call, the anonymous tip that had gone cold, these were no longer isolated incidents, but part of a horrifying narrative orchestrated by a single, calculating mind.
The courtroom buzzed with an almost palpable tension. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows of the Phoenix courthouse, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a stark contrast to the grim proceedings. Javier Rodriguez, the prosecutor, stood before the jury, his presence commanding yet understated. Mid-40s, with a solid build and earnest brown eyes, he radiated an aura of calm confidence. His dark hair, streaked with gray at the temples, was neatly groomed, and his conservative suit spoke of professionalism and gravitas. He began his opening statement, his voice steady and clear, laying out the prosecution's case against Roman Volkov. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his gaze sweeping across each juror, "this is a case about predation. It is a case about a man who, hidden behind the anonymity of the internet, stalked, manipulated, and ultimately murdered young women. The evidence will show that the defendant, Roman Volkov, meticulously planned and executed the horrific acts that led to the tragic deaths of Sarah Hayes and Ahmed Hassan." Rodriguez detailed the digital trail Volkov had left behind, the recovered deleted messages, the forensic evidence linking him to the Quickmart, and the chilling online persona, Bibliophile 88. He painted a vivid picture of Sarah Hayes, a bright, promising nursing student whose life was cruelly cut short. He spoke of her dreams, her family's love, and the unspeakable horror of her final moments. He then turned his attention to Volkov, describing him not as a force of nature, but as a man driven by a profound, twisted need for control and a delusion of superiority. Rodriguez presented the timeline of Volkov's digital stalking, the psychological grooming, and the eventual physical act of violence. He explained the legal definition of murder and the elements the prosecution would prove beyond a reasonable doubt: intent, motive, and opportunity. He emphasized the critical role of the recovered 911 call, a final, desperate plea from Sarah that, though cut short, provided crucial evidence of the killer's presence and identity. He spoke with unwavering conviction, his words weaving a narrative of justice sought for the victims, a demand for accountability for the calculated cruelty on display. He was the voice of the law, the embodiment of the community's demand that such acts would not go unpunished, ensuring that the truth, however painful, would be brought to light and justice would prevail.
The courtroom gallery was a tableau of raw grief. Sarah Hayes' parents sat stoically, their faces etched with a profound sorrow that seemed to have settled permanently into their features. Kovich watched them from her seat, a silent observer of the human cost of the crimes she investigated. She understood their pain, a silent echo of a personal tragedy from her own youth that fueled her unwavering drive for justice. Roman Volkov sat impassively at the defense table, his expressionless face a mask of detachment, the piercing blue eyes betraying none of the turmoil he had inflicted. He seemed an island of stillness in the storm of emotions surrounding him. Javier Rodriguez had just concluded his closing arguments, his voice resonating with the weight of the evidence presented, a final, powerful plea for justice. The courtroom now held its breath, awaiting the jury's verdict. Kovich closed her eyes for a brief moment, picturing Sarah Hayes as she was in the photograph, vibrant, hopeful, full of life.
She saw the auburn hair, the bright eyes, the warm smile that promised a future brimming with possibility. It was a stark contrast to the cold, sterile images from the crime scene, the tragic end of a life cut tragically short. The missing 911 call, the digital breadcrumbs, the relentless pursuit, it had all led to this moment. The meticulous work of the Phoenix Police Department, the forensic experts, the digital investigators, all converging on this single point of accountability. Lena Kovich, the relentless investigator, had pieced together the fragments, chasing down the digital predator, Roman Volkov, and bringing his reign of terror to an end. But the victory felt hollow, shadowed by the immense loss. The scar above her eyebrow felt like a phantom ache, a reminder of the battles fought and the lives irrevocably altered. The quick-mart murders, the digital stalking, the chilling efficiency of Volkov's methods, it was a stark reminder of the darkness that could lurk beneath the surface of everyday life, a darkness that preyed on innocence and extinguished dreams. The verdict, when it came, would bring a measure of closure, but the echo of Sarah Hayes's unfinished life would undoubtedly linger, a somber testament to the fragility of existence and the enduring pursuit of justice.
The air inside the Quick Mart convenience store, usually thick with the scent of stale coffee and sugar, was now heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the sterile, acrid odor of disinfectant. It was 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, October 24, 2023, and the fluorescent lights of the small Phoenix establishment cast a harsh, unforgiving glare on the scene of unimaginable violence. Detective Lena Kovich, her dark brown hair pulled back in its signature no-nonsense ponytail, stepped over the yellow police tape, her sharp gray eyes scanning every detail. The faint scar above her left eyebrow seemed to deepen as she took in the tableau: overturned shelves, scattered candy bars and chip bags, and the chilling, stark emptiness where life had so recently been. Ahmed Hassan, the store's night manager, a man in his late 40s, lay slumped behind the counter, his life extinguished in a brutal, senseless act. A few feet away, the body of Sarah Hayes, a bright-eyed 22-year-old nursing student, lay tragically still, her auburn hair fanned out on the linoleum floor. Lena felt the familiar, cold knot tighten in her stomach. This wasn't just a robbery gone wrong. The precision, the sheer brutality, spoke of something far more sinister. The faint scar above her eyebrow, a memento from a previous case, seemed to throb with a remembered ache. She knelt beside Sarah's body, her professional demeanor a thin veil over the rising tide of anger and sorrow. Sarah's nursing scrubs were torn, a stark contrast to the vibrant life she was meant to be living, the life Lena was sworn to protect. Lena observed the meticulous crime scene, the way the assailant had seemingly vanished into the desert night. There were no obvious signs of forced entry, suggesting Sarah might have known her attacker, or at least let them in willingly. The cash register was open, but a significant amount of money remained untouched, a detail that immediately signaled this was no ordinary crime of opportunity. This was calculated. This was personal. The silence of the store was deafening, broken only by the hushed murmurs of the forensic team and the distant wail of a siren. Lena stood up, her lean, athletic build radiating a quiet authority, and looked out the window at the dark, indifferent desert landscape. Somewhere out there, a predator walked free, and her promise to bring justice for Sarah and Ahmed, to restore order to this shattered scene, solidified with every beat of her determined heart. Detective Lena Kovich sat in the sterile, white glow of the Phoenix PD's digital forensics lab, the air humming with the low thrum of servers. The clock on the wall read 10:34 a.m., November 2nd, 2023, nearly 2 weeks since the Quick Mart massacre, and the case remained chillingly cold. The initial investigation had yielded frustratingly little. No witnesses who saw anything conclusive, no fingerprints that didn't belong, no clear motive. The break, Lena suspected, lay not in the physical world, but in the invisible ether of the internet. Her current obsession was the missing 911 call,
Records showed one had been placed from Sarah Hayes's phone just moments before the estimated time of death, a frantic, garbled plea for help that had never connected to an operator. The digital forensics team had spent days trying to reconstruct it, to pull anything coherent from the digital static, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. Lena, with her keen intellect honed by years of federal investigation, felt a gnawing certainty that this call was the key. It was Sarah's last attempt, her desperate cry into the abyss. Who was she trying to reach? Or, more disturbingly, who was she trying to warn? Lena's gaze, sharp and observant, fixed on the complex network diagrams projected onto the screen. Roman Volkov, the architect of this horror, was a ghost in the machine, his digital footprint meticulously scrubbed. His online persona, Bibliophile 88, was a masterful deception, a digital mask designed to lure and disarm. Lena's unknown dedication to order and accountability warred with the sheer anonymity of her quarry. The scar above her eyebrow felt like a phantom itch, a reminder of the battles fought and the ghosts that haunted her. She requested logs from Sarah's social media accounts, her dating apps, her online study groups. She needed to understand Sarah's digital life, to trace her steps in the virtual world that had led her to this fatal encounter. Every deleted message, every encrypted chat was a potential clue, a breadcrumb left by a predator who believed himself untouchable. The weight of Sarah's lost future, her bright eyes and hopeful gaze now a distant memory captured only in photographs, fueled Lena's relentless pursuit. The silence of the lab was pregnant with unspoken questions, the digital void holding its secrets close, daring her to find them. The missing 911 call was more than just a technical anomaly. It was a message from the grave, a desperate whisper from Sarah Hayes that Lena was determined to hear.
The courtroom buzzed with an anticipatory energy, a hushed tension that settled over the jury box like a shroud. It was March 15, 2024, the opening day of Roman Volkov's trial, and the weight of justice pressed heavily on the shoulders of Javier Rodriguez, the assistant district attorney tasked with securing a conviction. Javier, a man in his mid-40s with earnest brown eyes and a firm jawline, stood at the podium, his sharp conservative suit impeccable. His dark hair, with hints of gray at the temples, framed a face etched with the gravity of his responsibility. He looked out at the 12 faces in the jury box, each one a representative of the community's hope for accountability, and began to speak. His voice, calm and confident, cut through the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his tone resonating with unwavering conviction. On the night of October 23, 2023, a vibrant young life was extinguished in the most brutal and senseless manner. Sarah Hayes, a promising nursing student, was murdered in a Phoenix convenience store. Javier meticulously laid out the prosecution's case, painting a picture of a calculated predator who stalked his prey online before striking in the physical world. He spoke of Sarah's dreams, her family's love, the hopeful future that was stolen from her. He described Ahmed Hassan, the hard-working manager, also a victim of Volkov's violent rage. Javier detailed the forensic evidence, the digital trails, however faint, that pointed inexorably to Roman Volkov, known online as Bibliophile 88. He addressed the lack of forced entry, suggesting Sarah may have known her killer, a chilling testament to Volkov's manipulative prowess. The prosecution's objective was clear: to prove Volkov's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, to ensure that the man who thrived on anonymity and control faced the full force of the law. Javier referred to Detective Lena Kovich's relentless investigation, acknowledging her crucial role in piecing together the puzzle. He highlighted Volkov's history, his IT background, his unsettling detachment. The courtroom was hushed as Javier described the physical evidence, the digital forensics, the painstaking reconstruction of Sarah's last moments. He promised the jury a clear narrative, a story of a predator's meticulous planning and a victim's tragic end. His closing remarks for the opening statement were a powerful plea for justice, a promise to the victims and their families that the truth would prevail,
and that Roman Volkov would be held accountable for every life he shattered. The burden of proof was immense, but Javier Rodriguez was ready to carry it.
The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with unspoken accusations and the palpable tension of Roman Volkov's presence. He sat at the defense table, a study in unsettling stillness. Roman, 40 years old, gaunt with sharp features and piercing blue eyes that conveyed an unnerving intensity, looked almost detached from the proceedings. His thinning, mousy brown hair was unkempt, and his medium-height, wiry physique seemed to absorb the light. He favored dark, nondescript clothing, a deliberate choice to blend into the background, to disappear. Yet his stillness was not one of innocence. It was the coiled tension of a predator observing, calculating, waiting. Detective Lena Kovic watched him, her sharp gray eyes missing nothing. She had seen men like Volkov before, men who hid behind carefully constructed facades, who derived a twisted sense of superiority from their ability to manipulate and destroy. His face was often expressionless, a mask that hid a calculating mind, a mind that had meticulously planned the murders of Sarah Hayes and Ahmed Hassan. Javier Rodriguez, the prosecutor, meticulously presented evidence, each piece a deliberate hammer blow against Volkov's carefully crafted persona. He spoke of Volkov's online history, his digital footprints, the username Bibliophile88 that masked his true malevolent nature. Volkov's objective was clear: to evade capture, to revel in the psychological satisfaction of his crimes, to prove his intellectual superiority. He betrayed no outward emotion as Javier detailed the graphic nature of the killings, as he played the fragmented audio of Sarah's last moments, her desperate, garbled plea for help. His piercing blue eyes remained fixed, unblinking, revealing nothing of the turmoil or depravity within. Lena felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was a man who reveled in control, who saw vibrant lives like Sarah's as mere playthings to be broken. Her own past experiences, the personal tragedy that fueled her dedication to justice, made her acutely aware of the darkness that humans could harbor. She saw not just a defendant, but a manifestation of the hidden dangers lurking in the digital age, a chilling reminder that evil could wear a perfectly ordinary face. The courtroom, designed to be a place of truth and consequence, seemed to amplify Volkov's unnerving detachment, making his calculated composure all the more terrifying. The prosecution aimed to shatter that mask, to expose the monster beneath, but Volkov's unwavering, unnerving stillness suggested a long and arduous battle ahead.
The air in the Phoenix courtroom on April 10, 2024, was so thick with tension, it felt almost tangible. For weeks, the jury had deliberated, weighing the evidence, the testimony, the chilling narrative of Roman Volkov's crimes against Sarah Hayes and Ahmed Hassan. Now, they were returning with their verdict. Detective Lena Kovic stood by the prosecution table, her lean, athletic frame rigid, her sharp gray eyes fixed on the jury foreperson. The faint scar above her left eyebrow seemed more pronounced in the harsh courtroom light, a testament to the long, arduous road of this investigation. Beside her, Javier Rodriguez, his earnest brown eyes reflecting the solemnity of the moment, held his breath, his firm jaw set. Roman Volkov, seated at the defense table, remained his unnervingly still self, his gaunt face impassive, his piercing blue eyes revealing nothing. The foreperson, a woman in her 50s with a somber expression, stood and read the verdict, her voice clear and steady. On the charge of first-degree murder for the killing of Sarah Hayes, we find the defendant, Roman Volkov, guilty. A collective sigh swept through the courtroom, a release of weeks of pent-up anxiety. Lena felt a surge of emotion, a complex mix of relief, sorrow, and the quiet satisfaction of a promise kept. Justice, though delayed, had finally arrived for Sarah. Javier nodded subtly, his commitment to upholding the law vindicated. Roman Volkov's mask of detachment finally cracked, a flicker of something,
perhaps disbelief, perhaps cold rage crossing his features before he quickly regained his composure. The judge then read the verdict for Ahmed Hassan, guilty. As the judge pronounced a sentence of life imprisonment without parole, Lena's gaze drifted to a framed photograph on Javier's table. Sarah Hayes, her auburn hair framing a vibrant smile, her bright, intelligent eyes full of a future tragically unlived. The scar on Lena's brow throbbed faintly, a reminder that while justice had been served, the lives lost could never be reclaimed. The digital predator who had thrived in anonymity and sought to control and destroy was finally confined, his reign of terror over. But the echoes of his violence would forever resonate in the lives of the victims' families, a stark reminder of the darkness that can lie hidden beneath the surface, and the relentless, often painful pursuit of truth and accountability. Lena knew her work wasn't done. There were always more cases, more victims, more darkness to confront. But for today, in this courtroom, a measure of peace had been found.
The late Arizona sun cast long, distorted shadows across the linoleum floor of Detective Lena Kovich's cramped office. The air, thick with the scent of stale coffee and desperation, did little to dampen her resolve. It was October 17th, 2023, a Tuesday that had already felt like a month of Mondays. The Quick-Mart murders, just 3 days prior, had sent a ripple of unease through the normally placid streets of Phoenix. 2 lives extinguished in a violent, seemingly random act. Sarah Hayes, a bright nursing student with her whole future ahead of her, and Ahmed Hassan, a hard-working immigrant trying to build a new life. Kovich, a woman whose lean frame and sharp gray eyes spoke of unwavering persistence, ran a hand over the faint scar above her left eyebrow, a familiar ritual when a case truly burrowed under her skin. She'd seen her share of darkness during her time with a federal agency, but returning to her hometown force, she'd vowed to bring order to chaos, accountability where there was only brutality. This case, however, felt different. The preliminary reports hinted at something more than a simple robbery gone wrong. The missing 911 call, the lack of forced entry, the chilling precision of the act, it all pointed towards a predator, not a desperate opportunist. Her phone buzzed on the desk, a stark contrast to the piles of case files threatening to spill over. It was Captain Davies. "Kovich?" His voice, gruff but laced with a hint of respect, echoed through the receiver. "I'm assigning you the Quick-Mart case. It's a mess. Forensics are coming up empty, witnesses are scared, and the press is already circling like vultures. I need your tenacity on this, Lena. I need you to find the truth, no matter where it leads." Kovich felt a familiar surge of grim determination. This wasn't just another homicide. It was a puzzle that needed solving, a wrong that needed righting. Sarah Hayes and Ahmed Hassan deserved more than a cold case file. They deserved justice. She leaned back, the worn leather of her chair creaking in protest, and gazed at the corkboard already dotted with initial crime scene photos. The confident, hopeful gaze in Sarah Hayes' photograph seemed to stare back, a silent plea that Kovich vowed to answer. The investigation had officially begun, and for Lena Kovich, that meant leaving no stone unturned, no shadow explored.
The Hayes family home, usually a place of warmth and quiet resilience, now stood shrouded in a grief so palpable it seemed to seep from the very walls. It was October 18th, 2023, the day after Kovich was assigned the case. The Phoenix sun beat down relentlessly, a stark contrast to the icy chill that had settled over Sarah Hayes' parents. Kovich found Mrs. Eleanor Hayes sitting at the kitchen table, her hands tightly clasped, knuckles white, staring blankly at a framed photograph of her daughter. Sarah, 22, vibrant and full of life, smiled out from the picture, her shoulder-length auburn hair catching the light, her bright eyes reflecting a future brimming with promise. She was dressed in casual student attire, a testament to the ambitious nursing student she was, on track to graduate and make a real difference.
Kovich, her practical dark attire a stark contrast to the family's muted sorrow, approached with a quiet empathy. "Mrs. Hayes," she began, her voice low and steady. "I'm Detective Kovich. I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm here to understand who Sarah was and to find out what happened to her." Eleanor Hayes looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but clear, a flicker of something akin to hope igniting in their depths. She spoke of Sarah's dreams, her dedication to her studies at Arizona State University, her part-time job at a local clinic, her unwavering kindness. She was the eldest of 3 siblings, the responsible one, always looking out for others, just as she had always wanted to help people as a nurse. There was a small, almost imperceptible tremble in her voice as she recounted Sarah's last days. She mentioned Sarah had been a bit withdrawn lately, spending more time online. "She said she was meeting new people, making friends," Eleanor whispered, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "We thought it was normal for a young woman her age. She was so excited about her future, about helping her family, about making a positive impact." Kovich listened intently, taking meticulous notes. The mention of online interactions immediately flagged Kovich's attention. The absence of a forced entry and the unsettling nature of the murders hinted at a possible connection. She asked about Sarah's online life, any specific platforms, any new acquaintances. Eleanor, her gaze drifting back to the photograph, could only offer vague details, a mother's natural protectiveness perhaps overshadowing any specific worries she might have had. The weight of Sarah's lost potential, her unfulfilled aspirations, hung heavy in the air. Kovich made a mental note to look into Sarah's digital footprint, a digital ghost that might hold the key to unlocking this brutal mystery. The bright, intelligent eyes in the photograph seemed to hold a secret, a silent testament to a life cut tragically short, a plea for the truth that Lena Kovich was determined to unearth.
Back at the precinct, the hum of fluorescent lights seemed to amplify the gnawing silence of unanswered questions. It was the evening of October 18th, 2023. Detective Kovich meticulously combed through Sarah Hayes' digital life. The task was both painstaking and unsettling. Sarah, a bright and ambitious nursing student, had a robust online presence, a vibrant digital tapestry woven with connections, aspirations, and the everyday interactions of a young woman on the cusp of adulthood. Yet, as Kovich delved deeper, patterns began to emerge that sent a shiver down her spine. Behind the facade of social media updates and study groups lay a more clandestine digital world. Encrypted messages, anonymous forums, and carefully scrubbed browsing histories spoke of someone navigating the darker corners of the internet. The trail led Kovich to a username, Bibliophile88. It appeared in encrypted chats with Sarah, disguised as a pen pal, offering literary advice and a seemingly harmless friendship. But the tone, Kovich noted, was subtly manipulative, laced with an unsettling possessiveness masked by intellectual curiosity. This Bibliophile 88 seemed to know Sarah's routines, her fears, her deepest desires, with an intimacy that belied a casual acquaintance. The digital breadcrumbs were scarce, deliberately so. Whoever was behind Bibliophile 88 was tech-savvy, meticulous, and deeply invested in anonymity. Kovich's federal agency experience kicked in, the instinct to track down ghosts in the machine. She requested digital forensics to trace IP addresses, server logs, anything that could shed light on this phantom. Hours bled into the night. The office, usually a sanctuary of order for Kovich, felt like a battlefield where she was slowly losing ground. The clock on the wall ticked with agonizing slowness, each second a testament to the killer's ability to evade capture. The lack of physical evidence at the Quickmart crime scene, coupled with the almost surgical nature of the murders, started to paint a terrifying picture. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated, premeditated. The digital predator was playing a game, and Sarah Hayes was his chosen victim.
The cold, hard facts began to coalesce. A skilled manipulator, a vanished digital trail, and 2 lives brutally ended. Kovich leaned closer to her monitor, her gray eyes narrowed in intense concentration, the faint scar above her left eyebrow a subtle mark of her unwavering focus. She felt the presence of Bibliophile 88 lurking in the digital ether, a phantom of control and malice, and she knew, with chilling certainty, that this was only the beginning.
The digital trail, as faint as it was, eventually led Kovich and her team to a nondescript suburban house on the outskirts of Phoenix. It was October 19, 2023, a dreary Thursday morning that seemed to mirror the unsettling nature of their findings. The IP addresses, painstakingly traced through layers of proxies and VPNs, eventually converged on this single location. The resident? Roman Volkov, 40 years old, a man whose online persona, Bibliophile 88, was a carefully constructed mask for a deeply disturbed individual. Volkov, a former IT technician, had a history of erratic behavior, a quiet resentment simmering beneath a veneer of normalcy. His digital footprint, when scrutinized by Kovich's team, revealed a chilling obsession with anonymity, control, and a disturbing fascination with the darker aspects of human psychology. He curated online personas with surgical precision, grooming unsuspecting individuals, studying their vulnerabilities, and ultimately deriving a twisted gratification from their downfall. Kovich learned that Volkov had meticulously stalked Sarah Hayes for months, not just online, but through physical surveillance as well. He knew her class schedules, her favorite coffee shop, the route she took to the Quick Mart. His gaunt face, with sharp features and piercing blue eyes that conveyed an unsettling intensity, was a mask of detachment, hiding a mind that calculated every move, every word, every psychological manipulation. He viewed himself as a superior intellect, a puppeteer pulling the strings of those he deemed naive or vibrant. Sarah, with her optimism and aspirations, was the perfect target for his twisted desires. The motive, Kovich deduced, wasn't financial gain or a crime of opportunity. It was about power, control, and the psychological thrill of destruction. The Quick Mart murders were not random. They were the culmination of a long, calculated campaign of predation. The evidence gathered was circumstantial but compelling. Digital records of Volkov's online activity intersecting with Sarah's, surveillance footage placing him near the Quick Mart in the days leading up to the murders, and his unsettlingly still demeanor during initial questioning, a practiced facade of innocence. He was a ghost in the machine, a predator who had learned to exploit the anonymity of the digital age. Kovich felt a grim satisfaction. The elusive Bibliophile 88 was no longer a ghost. He was Roman Volkov, a man whose carefully constructed digital world was about to crumble under the weight of undeniable evidence. The hunt was over, but the fight for justice was just beginning.
The sterile, imposing courtroom of the Maricopa County Superior Court was a far cry from the dimly lit offices and quiet suburban streets where the investigation had unfolded. It was December 5, 2024, over a year since the Quick Mart murders, and the trial of Roman Volkov was about to begin. Assistant District Attorney Javier Rodriguez, a man whose solid build and earnest brown eyes projected an aura of calm confidence, stood at the prosecution's table. His dark hair, streaked with gray at the temples, was immaculately styled, his conservative suit exuding professional authority. He had spent months meticulously building a case, sifting through mountains of digital evidence, forensic reports, and witness testimonies, all to ensure that the chillingly calculated actions of Roman Volkov were met with the full force of the law. The prosecution's objective was clear: to present an irrefutable narrative of predation, manipulation, and murder, proving Volkov's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Kovich, now a key witness, sat in the front row, her presence a silent testament to her relentless pursuit of the truth.
She watched as Rodriguez, with steady hands and a clear voice, addressed the jury, laying out the grim details of Sarah Hayes's final days and the calculated malice of her killer. He spoke of Bibliophile 88, the digital predator who had systematically groomed and stalked Sarah, weaving a web of deception that culminated in the brutal murders at the Quick Mart, a crime that also claimed the life of Ahmed Hassan. Rodriguez navigated the complex digital evidence with precision, translating technical jargon into understandable terms for the jury, painting a vivid picture of Volkov's digital machinations and his terrifying obsession with control. He highlighted the absence of forced entry, the careful planning, and the digital footprints that, despite Volkov's attempts at anonymity, ultimately led back to him. The weight of seeking justice for Sarah Hayes and Ahmed Hassan rested heavily on Rodriguez's shoulders, a burden he carried with unwavering conviction. He knew the prosecution's role was not just to secure a conviction, but to articulate the profound loss experienced by the victims' families and to underscore the very real dangers lurking in the digital realm. His calm demeanor belied the intense pressure to deliver a verdict that reflected the severity of Volkov's crimes and brought a measure of closure to a community shaken by this calculated act of evil. The courtroom was silent, save for the measured cadence of Rodriguez's voice as he began to unveil the dark tapestry of Roman Volkov's digital depravity.
Detective Lena Kovic stared at the glowing monitor, the sterile hum of the precinct's server room a low thrum beneath her focused gaze. The digital footprint of their killer, Bibliophile 88, was proving to be as elusive as smoke. For weeks, they had chased shadows, sifting through terabytes of data, meticulously piecing together fragments of online interactions that led to the brutal deaths of Sarah Hayes and Ahmed Hassan. Sarah, a bright nursing student, full of life and promise, had vanished from her off-campus apartment in Tempe on a Tuesday night in early October 2023. Her roommate, a frantic young woman named Chloe Peterson, had called 911, her voice trembling with a fear that Kovic could practically taste through the phone line. But by the time officers arrived, Sarah was gone. The only disturbance a faint scent of something chemical and an overturned bedside lamp. Ahmed Hassan, a quiet computer science student who lived 2 blocks away, had been found a day later in a secluded section of Papago Park. His death was disturbingly similar, brutal, methodical, and leaving behind very little forensic evidence beyond the chilling certainty that he had encountered their killer. The digital trail was the only lead, a ghost in the machine, a user known only as Bibliophile 88, who had interacted with both victims on various obscure online forums dedicated to literature and cryptography. Kovic leaned closer, her sharp gray eyes scanning the intricate web of IP addresses, usernames, and encrypted messages. This wasn't just a killer. This was someone who understood the anonymity of the internet, someone who thrived in the digital ether, orchestrating their crimes from the perceived safety of the online world. The scar above her left eyebrow throbbed faintly, a familiar sensation that often accompanied the unraveling of a particularly twisted case. The scar was a reminder of a past encounter, a moment when she'd been too slow, too reliant on old-school police work. This time, she wouldn't make that mistake. The digital realm was a new battlefield, and Kovic was determined to master its every weapon. The pressure from Captain Davies was immense. The media was circling like vultures, and the families of Sarah and Ahmed were desperate for answers. Kovic knew that somewhere in this labyrinth of code and hidden servers lay the key to their tormentor, the unseen killer whose digital shadows had fallen over Phoenix.
Days blurred into nights as Lena Kovic and her team worked tirelessly, the Phoenix Police Department's digital forensics unit operating at peak capacity. They were digging deep into the online life of Bibliophile 88, a persona that seemed to shift and adapt, leaving behind a digital breadcrumb trail that was both sophisticated and deliberately misleading.
The profile that began to emerge was chillingly consistent, an individual with a profound understanding of cybersecurity, a penchant for obscure literature, and a deeply disturbing pattern of behavior. He engaged with his victims online for weeks, sometimes months, carefully grooming them, studying their habits, their vulnerabilities, their deepest hopes and fears. Sarah Hayes, with her vibrant optimism and plans for the future, had been drawn into conversations about classic novels. Ahmed Hassan, brilliant and introverted, had connected over shared interests in complex algorithms and philosophical debates about artificial intelligence. Bibliophile 88 was patient, manipulative, a predator who understood that the most effective way to isolate his prey was through psychological means before ever making physical contact. Kovich meticulously reviewed Sarah's social media, her digital diary entries, her emails. She saw a young woman on the cusp of her dreams, full of life, completely unaware that a digital stalker was meticulously dissecting her existence. The same was true for Ahmed. His online interactions, once analyzed, revealed a subtle shift in his demeanor in the weeks before his death, a growing unease, a sense of being watched, but nothing concrete enough to raise a red flag for law enforcement at the time. The killer was a phantom, operating from a place where traditional investigative methods struggled to penetrate. The team discovered that Bibliophile 88 utilized VPNs, Tor networks, and disposable email accounts, constantly obscuring his real-world identity. It was like trying to catch a ghost in a hurricane of data. Kovich, however, saw the patterns within the chaos, the specific literary references, the timing of his online engagements, the very specific coding languages he occasionally used in forum posts. These were not random. They were deliberate choices, fingerprints left by a mind that believed itself to be untouchable, a mind that reveled in the game of cat and mouse. The digital shadows were beginning to coalesce, and Kovich felt the familiar, cold certainty of closing in.
The digital trail was leading them closer, but the killer, Roman Volkov, was always one step ahead. Lena Kovich knew this because Volkov, operating as Bibliophile 88, actively taunted them, embedding subtle clues in online conversations and encrypted messages that only someone with his level of technical expertise could decipher. He saw himself as intellectually superior, playing a twisted game with the authorities, believing he was too clever to be caught. His motivations stemmed from a deep-seated need for control and a profound sense of isolation, which he masked with an almost pathological detachment from reality. The Phoenix Police Department's forensics team, led by a tenacious young analyst named Anya Sharma, had finally managed to isolate a series of deleted messages from Sarah Hayes' cloud storage, messages she had drafted but never sent. One in particular sent shivers down Kovich's spine. Dated just hours before Sarah disappeared, it was addressed to an unknown recipient and spoke of a growing unease, a fear that someone she had met online, Bibliophile 88, was far more dangerous than he appeared. Sarah described his unsettling intensity, his invasive questions about her personal life, and how he seemed to know things about her that she hadn't shared. She mentioned feeling trapped, unable to disengage without confrontation. This was the critical link, the proof that Sarah had recognized the danger, but her fear had paralyzed her. The unsent message was a desperate cry for help that never reached its destination. Kovich felt a surge of anger, a raw, visceral emotion that she quickly channeled back into her work. She imagined Sarah, alone in her room, typing out her fears, her fingers trembling, only for the words to remain locked away. The same pattern was beginning to emerge with Ahmed Hassan. He had been researching advanced encryption techniques, seeking ways to secure his digital communications, indicating he too had sensed a threat. Kovich instructed Anya to focus on the metadata associated with Sarah's unsent draft. It was a long shot, but sometimes the smallest digital detritus could lead a hunter to their prey. The ghost was becoming more tangible, its form shifting in the digital ether, but Kovich was ready to confront it, to drag it out of the shadows and into the light. With the name Roman Volkov now firmly attached to the digital persona Bibliophile 88, the hunt intensified. Lena Kovich and her team moved with a calculated urgency, knowing that Volkov was likely aware he was being tracked. The digital trail, though faint, had led them to a specific address in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Surveillance teams were deployed, their presence a subtle, unobtrusive ripple in the ordinary flow of the street. Kovich watched the live feed from a command center, her gaze fixed on the modest, well-maintained house. Volkov, the gaunt, wiry man with the unsettling intensity in his blue eyes, was seen occasionally moving behind the curtains, his movements unnervingly still. He was a ghost in his own home, a man who had perfected the art of disappearing. Kovich briefed Javier Rodriguez, the assistant district attorney who would be leading the prosecution. Rodriguez, a man known for his calm confidence and unwavering conviction, understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about proving Volkov committed murder, it was about proving he operated with premeditation, using the digital world as his weapon and his shield. The evidence, painstakingly gathered by Kovich's team, would need to be presented in a way that was comprehensible to a jury, bridging the gap between the abstract world of cybercrime and the brutal reality of the physical crimes. They had found digital evidence of Volkov accessing websites detailing Sarah's university schedule and Ahmed's local haunts. They had recovered fragments of deleted search histories on his devices, revealing chilling queries related to poisons and undetectable methods of disposal. The unsent message from Sarah, once recovered and its metadata analyzed, provided the crucial link, demonstrating Volkov's prolonged predatory engagement. Kovich knew this was the turning point. The hunter, for so long concealed behind a veil of digital anonymity, was now the hunted. The meticulous planning, the careful deception, the twisted satisfaction he derived from controlling and destroying lives, it was all about to be laid bare. The unseen killer was about to face the consequences of his digital shadows, and Lena Kovich was ready to ensure justice for Sarah Hayes and Ahmed Hassan. The unsent message from Sarah Hayes was the anomaly, the digital breadcrumb that Bibliophile 88 had inadvertently left behind, perhaps in a moment of overconfidence or a twisted desire to toy with his victims even after their demise. Lena Kovich seized on it. While Roman Volkov believed he was master of his domain, a digital phantom orchestrating perfect crimes, he had overlooked one crucial element: human psychology. Even the most meticulous planner could be undone by their own ego. Anya Sharma, the digital forensics analyst, worked feverishly, tracing the metadata associated with the draft. It wasn't much, a timestamp, a generic software identifier, but Kovich knew that in the digital world, every bit of data told a story. They cross-referenced this information with Volkov's known online activity, his forum posts, his login times, and the originating IP addresses, however masked. It was a painstaking process, like assembling a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. The IP addresses were a labyrinth, bouncing through proxy servers across the globe, but Anya managed to find a recurring pattern, a faint echo of a connection to an ISP that served a particular residential area on the outskirts of Phoenix. It was a fragile thread, but it was the strongest lead they had. Kovich also directed her team to re-examine the limited forensic evidence from Sarah's apartment and the scene where Ahmed was found. They scoured public records, looking for anyone with a background in IT, a history of stalking, or a connection to the obscure literary circles that Bibliophile 88 frequented. The name Roman Volkov began to surface. A former IT technician with a history of minor cybercrimes and a disturbing online presence under various aliases, including Bibliophile 88. He lived a solitary life, unremarkable on the surface, but his digital footprint revealed a deeply disturbed individual with a profound need for control and a dangerous fascination with manipulation. The digital shadows were no longer an amorphous threat. They were beginning to take shape,
the outline of a man who saw himself as a puppet master, pulling the strings of his victims from the safe distance of his computer screen.